Zoom started something new this week. I think it's just this week that it started, that it now publicly declares that recording's in place, which I guess is a courtesy and appropriate, but it is a bit disruptive. Just that's what my experience has been so far of it. Without further ado, then let's jump in. And we are doing a 30-minute lunch and learn. For those of us on the West Coast, it's 9 a.m. and you're wondering, how's this a lunch? But we have anticipated having guests from, well, just about everywhere. And the vast chunk of those might be from the East Coast. And for them, it's lunchtime. So that's where lunch and learn came to be. And we expect that it'll take roughly 15 minutes of some material I want to cover. And if there's questions or time for chat, of course, there'll be an opportunity to do that. And if there is, great. And if not, in either circumstance, we'll be off this call by at the bottom of the hour. So 28 minutes from now. So my question for you today is, do you have a business owner's mindset? Well, let me start by asking you a question. What are the first three words that come to mind when I say the word money? What's the first three words that come to mind when I say the word money? And it'd be great if you, the first thought or two that came to mind for you, put that in the chat. And what I often hear is things like need more, a form of currency or value exchange that often comes up. Scarcity, want more, need more, bills. Those are often things that come up. Sometimes it comes up, it's investment and, things oriented in that way. So the reason I ask this question is to pose or offer the thought that money is an abstract concept backed by confidence. And what that really means is money isn't anything except what we believe to be true about it. And yet all of us have a relationship with money, and it governs how we behave. And as an example of that, I think everybody on this call would be able to answer this question. Does anybody know the story of somebody who wins a lottery and 5 years later that person is broke? Everybody knows that story. And the reason that happens is the money mindset of the average middle-class person is the purpose of money is to spend or to pay bills. And so when that person is given a lot of money, their behavior then becomes about spending lots. And 5 years later, everyone's in the trailer park's got a new truck, but buddy is broke. What happens if you gave that same lottery winning to someone, say, for example, like Warren Buffett? What would his thought be about that money? Well, he'd have an entirely different way of thinking about that money. And as a result, he would think his behavior around money would change. So what does that look like? Let's talk about the money mindset and the ladder, the entrepreneurial ladder. So an employee would think about money as earning a salary. They take a handout from somebody in exchange for the work that they do for them. A self-employed person thinks about money as making money. So it's a different verb. They produce money in some fashion out of maybe even thin air. An owner thinks about money as having a third-party entity, someone apart from themselves that generates profit from which they get to participate in. So they receive profits. An investor thinks about return on investment. And an entrepreneur, Warren Buffett, doesn't work for money. Money works for him. Now, you can't operate, none of us can operate at the level above our current money mindset. And what that means, many of us on the call, and certainly in my experience of working with my clients, many of them operate at the money mindset of being self-employed in a business that has their name on it, or at least the brand they own. And so they operate at the level of a technician. They operate at the level of, I have a job, just over broke, being the technician in my business, whether that's you're an accountant, You could be an electrician. You could own a factory. In fact, one of the best bits of feedback I've gotten recently is from a client who read the E-Myth that makes the case of technician, manager, and entrepreneur level in every business. And the aha moment that she had, and part of the reason we're doing this webinar today, is that person came to suddenly recognize, I'm a technician. No wonder my business is causing me stress and I can't grow my business because I'm really acting like a self-employed person. So how do you recognize what are some of the symptoms of someone working in a hub and spoke business? And so if you think about the image of a bicycle wheel, and the hub is the center, and everyone in the entire place, everyone in the entire business has to consult with you in some fashion or another before anything happens in your business. You're a hub and spoke manager. Or let me give you another metaphor. If you think of yourself as the only air traffic controller at the airport, and if you go to the washroom, all the planes crash. If that's how you currently think of yourself, or if that's what's happening for you, then you are a hub and spoke manager. So what are some of the signs that you're a hub and spoke manager? You're the only one who signs the checks, that there isn't a team that manages all of the administrative overhead. Your phone is constantly ringing, pinging, or dinging. And in effect, what that causes you to do is to always be playing whack-a-mole, or you feel like you're pinball. Your entire day is in reaction to what others are demanding of you in the form of your phone ringing, pinging, or dinging. If your revenue is flat year over year, it could be because you're at the maximum of what your ability to sell, you or your business's ability to sell, because you can't scale beyond your own capabilities. Your vacations suck, meaning you probably haven't had one. Or if you did, you have to keep your phone on. And half the time on your vacation, you're wondering, stressing what's going on in the business. And let me give you this as a thought exercise. What the opposite of a hub and spoke manager, when they go on vacation, here's what they do. What would have to happen so that in 1 hour, once a week, you have the opportunity to talk to somebody in your business? And in that hour, you would be able to review what was and wasn't working in the business, and that you would know in that hour what needed to be done to fix the things that were working or not working in the business. What would have to happen? What set of, first of all, who's operating the business? What set of KPIs would you need to know in place? And in fact, what a thought you want to keep in mind is, for that to be made possible, this has to be true. Systems run your business. People run your system. You lead your people. And when that's true, 80%, 90% of what happens in a business happens in a routine, systematized way. Done in a way that nothing is exceptional about it. And as a result, it happens time and time and time again in a way that meets your customers' expectations. And what that means is about 15%, roughly speaking, of the business is exceptions to the rule, and those are the ones that you're going to be paying attention to. So another way of describing that is systematize the routine, humanize the exception. Systematize the routine, humanize the exception. Systems run the business. 80–90% of what happens in the business is done in a systematic way. The balance is the exception. Yesterday, I had a talk with a client, and when we were talking about a system to help him do invoicing, his feedback to me is, when he thought systems, he was thinking about this massive kind of overhead of SOPs and bureaucracy, and the system I suggested to him is that his business is one where it requires a lot of his input early in the day, but that he set up a system, believe it or not, this is a system that at 3 o'clock every Tuesday, he was going to set that time aside to get the invoicing done and the quoting done. And sometimes the circumstances of the day wouldn't allow him to do that, and so we had a backup plan. And the backup plan is if it didn't happen on Tuesday, it had to happen on Thursday at 3 o'clock. And the second system we talked about yesterday to help him with that is his work demand changes as a result of his customers' needs changing from week to week. And his business was always reacting to the demands that his customers were giving him, and he didn't know from one day to the next what was on his work plate. And so instead, what he set up as a system is 3 o'clock every Thursday, he was going to send out a text or an email to the people that he was doing business with so that he could get an estimate from them of what they needed from him for the next week. That's a system. It's a really simple one. But that changed the dynamic of him always having to react to his business, his clients, customers who were largely very unorganized, and it was always herky-jerky and pain and responding to yesterday's emergencies. So the other way that I can describe this is systems change as your business changes. And so if you're the captain of a Navy boat, let's use this as a metaphor, and it's a 50-foot boat, and there might be a crew of 10, in that circumstance, if the captain is the most qualified person, he's going to be in the engine room from time to time with tools in hand. That's the system. Now let's make you the captain of a 150-foot Navy vessel, and now you've got a crew of, let's say, 50. Well, are you going to be in the engine room with tools? Almost never. It would have to be a panic if you're in the engine room with tools, because now there's someone in charge of the engine room, and you're reviewing the results of that person in how they've conducted themselves. You're not the hub and spoke anymore. They're the hub and spoke of the engine room in which you're consulting. It's a change in how you think about it. And what would happen if you were now the captain of a Navy boat, which happened to be an aircraft carrier? And now there's 2,000 people on board. What would your system look like now? Well, the only time you're in the engine room is likely ceremonial, as in you're giving somebody their 20-year certificate. And so systems scale. And so if you're thinking, oh man, I've got to have a system that's like the system that would be in an aircraft carrier, it doesn't have to look like that. It can be relatively simple, like the example of the customer I was working with yesterday, who set up a system to routinely get out his invoicing. By the way, one of his competitors, he told me, on average, that competitor was sending out invoices every 50 days late. Can you imagine the cash flow problems that guy was having? So we now have a system in place where routinely the phone rings, the phone sets an alarm that reminds him to leave the job site, go to his office, get the invoicing out. It'll now happen in a routine way. And that's how you stop being a hub and spoke owner. If you spend more time negotiating than a union boss, negotiating with your customers, negotiating with your team, negotiating with your suppliers, if you're the only one doing the negotiating, it's likely you're a hub and spoke manager. If you're the one who has to close up every night, it's likely you're a hub and spoke manager because there's no one else on the team. I have a client who has to be in his building 7 days a week, 10 p.m. at night, because they're running 2 shifts. That guy's a hub and spoke manager, and he'll fess up to it. If you know all of your customers by their first name, you're a hub and spoke manager, because the first person your customer thinks about is you and not someone on your team. That doesn't scale. If you get the tickets, these are the complimentary tickets to the ball game, to the hockey game, to the golf, you're a hub and spoke manager. Then finally, you're a hub and spoke manager if you get CC'd on more than 5 emails a day. We're going to talk about that in a second, how to change that. So really, the first shift in mindset and getting away from being a hub and spoke manager is to change the question you ask yourself. For most people that are self-employed or having a job within their business, they ask themselves the question of, how can I get this done? Which means they're going to be the hub, because they're always thinking, I have to do it. And a better question is, how can this get done? Because I am not doing it. And as soon as you shift that question and realize that you're not the right person to do it, it entirely changes how you think about your business. Some of you know this story, but for me, the aha I had is when I realized the only thing I should do in my business is talk. And the only talking I should do is to my customers, my clients. I should talk to my prospects. And the only other talking I can do is talking to the team, thank you, Patty, and others who do everything else. Because the only thing that I'm best at in my business that no one can replace me is the work I do when I'm talking to a client. So how do you get there? Well, the first thing you'd want to do is survey your time. How do you identify where you're best suited, what produces the most value for you in your business? Take the effort. It's going to take some overhead, but take the effort to figure out what am I doing with my time? A couple of things will emerge for you. Number one is you'll make better choices in the moment because you're getting some feedback and you're actually recognizing what you do. You're going to likely find out 20–25% of your time you're actually not that productive, and now that becomes visible to you. You'll make better choices in the moment because the feedback will say, is this really the best use of my time? Maybe I should be doing something else. And as a result of that, even that exercise will help you a lot. But even better than that is if you do the skill fund box. So it's a 2x2 quadrant. On one axis is skill from low to high. On the other one is interest, enjoyment, and fun. And really what that means is getting paid. And so if you're in the upper right quadrant, high skill, high fun, this is the work that generates the most value for you in your business. And let's notionally say that it's worth $200 an hour or $500 an hour. When you're in that box, that's how much value you're creating for your business. And all the things that are in the lower left box, low scale, low fun, is work that you want to get off your plate. And it's work that you're likely thinking to yourself, oh, crap, or words to that effect. I don't want to do this, or it causes a knot in your stomach, or it's causing you to, geez, I hate doing this. If you're experiencing any of that, it's almost certainly in the lower left box. And the thing you want to do is ask yourself that question, not how can I get this done? How can this get done? Because I'm not doing it. Let me tell you about a client named Derek who has a business that he helps. It's a consulting kind of business, probably has a team of about 10. And he helps his customers implement software into their businesses. And his sales processes, they would lead a sales process, they'd be a handshake, and they would agree they're going to work together. And the first part really of the delivery is they had to do a meeting which they would describe scope and deliverables. What exactly are we being hired to do? How do we know we've done it? And that'd be a 2 to 4 hour kind of meeting. And the end of which Derek would then have to take the summary, the notes, and turn that into the scope and deliverables document. He hated doing it. He liked having the conversation, that was fun, but the actual administrivia, ooh, that was hard to do. And so what we did is we went to Upwork, we hired what turned out to be an electrical engineer. That guy, 4 days later, gave him a template, and 4 days later, $80 later, handed something to Derek, which was better than Derek could have done on his own. It was better. And Derek had to do the last 20%, which was the tailoring, the customizing for the specifics of that client. And so it's an example of not just administrivia that you can do, but even big chunks of important work can be done by others. And the most valuable part of that work or project can be done by you. So when you think about what should you be focused on, this is a typical org chart of a business. Every business has got a box where there's a CEO at the top. There's a general manager. Here's the list of duties you'd have to do. There's someone in charge of the overheads, operations, finance, admin. There's someone in charge of delivering whatever it is you do. And there's someone in charge of acquiring and converting clients. As the owner of even a solopreneur kind of business, you can think of what would I have to do to delegate all of what's in this box: corporate operations, finance, and admin. What can I do to delegate parts of this? And in fact, in my case, I've delegated all of lead generation to people on the team. And the only part of this that I do is lead conversion. And so in each of these boxes, what are the things you do? What are the things someone else can do for you? And so when you think about delegating, one of the obstacles of many hub and spoke managers is they're not very good at delegating. In fact, what they describe as delegating is in fact abdicating. And Ken Blanchard, the 1 Minute Manager, has a really great description. When you delegate to someone, you give them responsibility for something, but you stay in the information loop, the support loop, the coaching loop. Abdicating is when you give somebody a responsibility and then you disappear. And so this presentation, if you sign up in the chat, I'm happy to send it to you, but here's a way to think about delegation through 10 shades of gray. All the way from wait to be told, do exactly as I say, all the way through to, hey, it's your responsibility, it's up to you now. And in everything, every major chunk of work you do with your clients, or excuse me, with the people, with your team, you want to have a conversation with them with this chart out and available to both of you so that you can agree where on this level of responsibility you should be. And in lots of cases, you know, you've got someone you've been working with for a while and they've got 4 major responsibilities, and 3 of them, they're a level 10, but the 4th one you've just assigned to them and they may be a level 4. So let's clarify, let's you know, let's not let confusion reign. Why are you treating me this way, level 4 on this, and yet I think I'm a level 10? Well, yeah, you are on 3 things. And I want to get you to a level 10, but for the moment, you're a level 4, and that goes a long way to clarifying and improving the kind of communications you're having. So 3 tips. Let me just quickly run through 3 tips for hiring a great virtual assistant. Number 1, the incumbent does the SOP. So my virtual assistant is Noemi. She did me a great favor. I hired her in 2018 to do something for me. And then to my surprise, about 30 minutes later, she sent me the SOP. The standard operating procedure. What she did is she took her notes on the recording and converted it into a step-by-step record of everything that needed to be done. So whenever you're delegating, the SOP is done by the incumbent. And what you get as a result is, first of all, you get a clear description of the actual work and how to do it. Number 2 is you get the benefit of knowing that the person who you've given responsibility for has a clear understanding of what's required because they've documented it for you. So you get an SOP, you're not writing it, they write it based on your instructions. First thing. Second thing, when you hire a virtual assistant, my recommendation is that you outline a project that's got several components to it, and that you hire 3 people at the same time to do the first 10% of the project. And the reason I did this is because the first person I hired wasn't very good. She was capable of doing exactly what I asked, but wasn't really proactive enough or insightful enough or experienced enough to understand what else she would be bringing to the table. So I let that person go. I paid twice as much for Noemi, and then I discovered she was infinitely better. So in retrospect, it would have been better if I'd hired both of them on the same day, discovered which of the 2 was the better, because they did that first 10% of the job, and I didn't waste the first 6 weeks or the first 3 months with someone who ultimately wasn't the best. And then the 3rd tip I have is a thing called the No Brown Smarties clause. So the Rolling Stones had a rider with the people that would host them or put on the event in every city. And that rider had a statement really deep in the contract that said no brown Smarties. There was to be a bowl of Smarties in the center of the room, but there was no brown ones. So when I first read that, I thought, oh man, these Rolling Stone guys must have been divas. But in fact, there was another purpose, and that was they wanted to make sure that the entire rider had been read and contemplated. And so the evidence of that is where the brown Smarties. So you're not going to do that in whatever you post on Upwork. But you do want to say something like deep in the description of the job, the subject line has to be ABC 1, 2, 3, or the subject line has to be no brown Smarties. One of my clients posted a job and he deliberately made 5 grammatical mistakes, and he only talked to the people that identified at least 4 of the 5, because that was important to him. Upwork's great. If you go to Upwork and search for virtual assistant, the key is to use these filters. And so I preferred using freelancers. You'll see this is a box on the left-hand side, and I wanted to pay no more than $10. And I was only willing to work with people that had 90% job success rate as deemed by the people that worked with them. And I needed them to be fluent, but they weren't, in my case, customer facing. So I didn't need them to be native or speak to my customers in a way where there couldn't be any concern about their ability to speak. And so the 3 tips is they write the SOP, hire 3 at a time, no brown Smarties clause. And so ultimately my question for you today is, do you have a JOB or do you have a business? And if you're a business and you've got a team and you still feel like you're the hub and spoke man or person, and you feel like you're in jeopardy anytime you have to go to the bathroom because you're the air traffic controller and you'd like some help with that, we'd love to talk to you. If you're good to go and this is helpful, or if it hasn't been helpful, I'm sorry about that. Great. If on the other hand, you have a question or two, or there's something I can do to help, feel free to go to timewithjohn.com and that'll book you into 15 minutes of my calendar, and I'll help you work through whatever it is you're thinking about. And, you know, maybe there's even some of you thinking I need some help. And if that's the case, that's awesome. Go to timewithjohn.com. Let's have that introductory call. Let's see what's on your mind. And if it makes sense, we'll book a complimentary coaching call or a discovery call to see if we're a fit. I've rambled a lot today. I thought there'd be more time for a chat. Do we have any questions, Patty?